U.S. military actions against Venezuela, going as far as forcibly taking the country president to the U.S. soil, have sent shivers across the international community. Many are alarmed over a blatant violation of international law and wanton infringement of another nation's sovereignty. Many analysts ask, when a bully openly tramples on the rules, how should the world respond? What can be done to prevent such thuggish act in the future? On these and more, here's my exclusive interview with Danilo Türk, the former Slovenian president and a member of the Club de Madrid. He earlier served as the UN Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs when the Iraq War broke out. I'm joined by former Slovenian President Danilo Türk, who is also a member of the Club de Madrid. President Türk, thank you so much for joining our program and this discussion.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, President Türk, what do you make of the latest development, especially the fluid story of Venezuela? What do you think is the nature of all of this? What does that say about the world today?
Well, there are two aspects that have to be looked at, first separately and then together. Now, separately, I think that one has to be realistic. The Americas have been the domain of United States of America continuously. Although military means were not used recently, United States have never abandoned the Monroe Doctrine from 1823 and have used it occasionally. So it's not so surprising if things like this happened. They happened in relation to Panama several years ago, now in Venezuela. And one has to be really quite realistic about relations between the United States and the rest of the Americas. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is global. Recent developments around Venezuela have clearly defined the three remaining global powers, which are United States of America, of course, China, and Russia. While European Union, is not a big player here and doesn't have an opportunity, means, and the will to do anything really serious about the situation in Venezuela.
You talk about the U.S. did that before, several times.
Yes.
Monroe Doctrine never died in the U.S. But one could argue that earlier, quote, effort to translate power into legitimacy is the hidden pillar of American primacy that is suggested by Fareed Zakaria in his recent comments. So to translate that into plain words, the U.S. used to pretend at least it is seeking support and the legitimacy from the international community, and now it doesn't anymore. It does not even pretend to do so anymore. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that Fareed Zakaria is right. I think that he is taking a slightly idealistic view of this situation and similar situations in the past. The United States, in fact, didn't care very much about legitimacy when force was used. The question was not one of legitimacy, the question was one of effectiveness. Was use of force in a particular situation effective? Now, I think the interesting thing here is to compare the current situation with Venezuela to the one with Cuba in the past. As you know, in the early 60s, the United States intervened in Cuba and didn't succeed. So that has created a certain deficit of effectiveness on the side of the United States. Well, legitimacy was never really a serious question. This time, the military action was effective. It was very limited. It didn't involve any kind of a large-scale military invasion. It was a surgical operation with, unfortunately... So far. And I believe that the Americans don't have a plan to go into Venezuela with a large military force. It was really focused on capturing President Maduro, and the rest would be negotiated.
So you are saying this is practice lately is likely to embolden both the administration and probably the administrations to come, as long as the U.S. is still having the hard military power and some kinds of arrangements with forces within the country in which it is to invade.
Well, look, emboldening is a two-edged sword, because you see, a big power can be emboldened by the military success, but no military success lasts forever. Things can go wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was a certain type of success in one situation does not necessarily mean that things will work in other situations.
Right. I want to go back to your earlier experiences, President Türk, if I could. You worked in the United Nations as one in charge of political affairs when the war in Iraq erupted without the UN consent. And we remember the fierceful debate going on in New York and also in so many corners around the world, the demonstrations against military actions. But how would you compare the situation then?
Well, there are very serious differences here. I would like to emphasize the differences. I mean, the situation of Iraq was one of an acute tension following an earlier war in Iraq, which United States won. But then Saddam Hussein was seen as being responsible for a buildup of nuclear weapons, which many doubted. And of course, we in the Secretariat of the United Nations knew quite well that there were no weapons of mass destruction. So I would like to say that the UN inspections, which were on the ground, led by Hans Blix, a Swedish diplomat and specialist on weapons of mass destruction, were quite clear. We haven't found, they said, we haven't found any evidence of those weapons. So it was clear that the military action, which was a large-scale military action, was without any basis of legitimacy or international law, but it was understood in the context of an ongoing conflict which started earlier and which continued after that invasion of 2003. And I remember the newspaper reports also of that era when they said, well, the US is basking in the glory of a military victory. Surely there was a short-term military victory, but over a long time, that became really a very unpleasant experience for the United States and for the world. Yeah. And that has actually helped the United States to refrain from this sort of military activity for a very long time. Now things are changing again. We'll see how that unfolds, but I think that Venezuelan situation was actually surgical and therefore doesn't suggest that a large-scale military operation is contemplated.
But on the other hand, it is invasion as being described by many. And it is also taking away the president of one country, even though the legitimacy of that country, the legitimacy of that president among some is debatable, but most of the international community accepted that as the legitimate president of the country. So here comes another question. If the U.S. never cared, really, according to you, what is the international law in real essence? Then is the international law put together with very much the support of the U.S. after World War II a pretentious arrangement, or it is only an arrangement governing others besides the United States, except the United States?
The military action of the United States in Venezuela was a clear violation of international law. So if you take the legal aspect only and say, okay, let's discuss this situation from the legal point of view, I think the conclusion clearly is that that was a violation of international law, and therefore the American courts of law will have to look at this thing, and we'll see what they come up with. I'm sure that the defense of President Maduro will emphasize this violation of international law argument very strongly, because no foreign country is entitled to judge the level of legitimacy of another country. But United States, in this case and in some other cases, tried to exercise what they call exceptionalism. In United States, in the political culture of the United States, there is a very strong tendency of exceptionalism.
Well, it's very nice to give it a name for so-called exceptionalism. Let's not just put makeup on it.
No. What I'm trying to say is I try to explain the American state of mind, so to speak. But of course, I don't agree with that.
We are seeing it at the same time when the UN is becoming weaker.
Well, this is a very serious threat, not only to complete dismantlement of the system created under the Charter of the United Nations, but also use the word rule of the jungle. Sure, I mean, there is a very serious danger that things can go very, very wrong. And therefore, one would need to think quite seriously about what are we doing? The United Nations have been marginalized, the organization and its principles have been marginalized. That tendency of marginalization of the United Nations has been there for a number of years now. And this process is really very harmful to the international stability and also to the need for working for prosperity in the world. There are huge and how should I say, urgent tasks which are now put on the back burner, which are now almost forgotten. I just like to mention one. The world is going into a serious crisis of water availability. And there is practically no talk about a very serious problem which will affect many, many millions of people tomorrow, because we are so focused on the use of force. And I would like to emphasize again, an example of an illegal use of force. So the situation is really very concerning.
Greenland, it is an issue between two allies, United States and its European allies. This place is well known for the possibility of being part of the expanding sea route. It is also important for raw materials, oil, rare earth, and etc. It might be also for military use because the U.S. has military bases there already, and also for so-called strategic competition. The matter of fact is, it is one country trying to get hold of the ownership of a place which belongs to another country, another people. How do you see the Europeans, if I could generalize like that, look at this issue and ask yourself about the nature of relationship between the United States and Europe?
Well, in short, and I will be very honest, Europe is right now frightened and confused, both. And that actually...
Very diplomatically when you say confused.
No, but look, that's a fact, and it's very visible. I mean, I'm not revealing any big secret here. Right now, it doesn't seem that there are any real scenarios in place, but they can be developed and fairly quickly. I mean, they have both political and military side. On the political side, I think if European countries come with a unified front against this adventure on Greenland, the Americans will have to think about it seriously, and there will be a debate in the United States as well. So, I mean, the idea of simply taking over sovereignty over Greenland is not a foregone conclusion. This is not something that will inevitably happen. We'll see. And there is a possibility for European countries to figure out their own position to contain this idea of American seizure of Greenland. So that's the political side. But then on the military side, the United States has its military bases in Greenland. I mean, this is very inhospitable terrain, so the military base is not very large, and of course it has been quite specialized. Now, is there a need for something more or something different in Greenland? I don't know. Is there a need to do some face saving, to say, all right, we have started something related to the security of Greenland and security of the Western world, so we'll put a little more military capacity on Greenland and everything will be fine. that sort of outcome is also not excluded. But it is too early to say which way the situation will turn. My guess would be that Greenland will remain part of Denmark.
So, Mr. President, what does the latest events involving Greenland following the Venezuela-U.S. action tell us about the direction of U.S. diplomacy, if we could still use that word? Or is it more hedging for raw material, strategic competition, and also a geopolitical competition? Is it more about the United States looking at itself, say, I have the hard power today, nobody could rival with me, and therefore I'm gonna take what I want without pretense, when I still have it? What if the other players can catch up?
Obviously, this is happening in a world which does not have only one big power anymore. China is back, and China has to be taken seriously. Russia is largely back and will have to be taken seriously. And Europe is now in a very sensitive and delicate situation. Europe does not follow the United States approach voluntarily. And of course, there will be a negotiation, there will be a discussion and everything. So I think that what this situation brought was something that I would call a path or a tendency towards clarity of global balance. But I mean, some of the big countries, and only 3 of them are really now in a position to define the global balance. And that is United States, of course China, and of course Russia. This is not new. This sort of triangular world existed before. It was different from what it is today, but in essence, the 3-power balance is the name of the game today, again. And I believe that it is possible to manage that triangular relationship in a way which prevents further military adventure.
There are different debates, different arguments about the nature of the world today. For example, since I'm based in Beijing, so I know a lot about China's argument. It's been talking about multilateralism in a different time. It is also talking about collective global governance and the integrity of the global system and international law and norms. But of course, you can say it is a runner-up to the biggest power. And China has never officially accepted the concept of so-called G2, which is United States and China. So that's argument coming from China. You also see middle powers, so to speak, if we could give them a name, like many in the Middle East, with enormous amount of energy and financial power, suggesting they are looking for a multipolar world. By the way, that was also China's argument. So you also see Russia talking about that, some of the other countries as well. So when you say 3 powers, that is so clear, the reality of the world. What do you exactly mean?
Well, I think that I try to identify, perhaps in a slightly simplified manner, the situation today. But that situation is not necessarily going to last forever, because as you rightly explained, I mean, China doesn't have an interest and doesn't really pronounce a policy which would try to establish some sort of bilateral parity with the United States. This is not a bilateral or the kind of bipolar world which we were used to see during the Cold War era. That's not in China's interest. That's not China's policy. China is much more open to pluralistic idea of international community, and it's open to other players, regional players, plus other players which are large countries and have something to contribute to that. So I think that China is genuinely oriented towards a pluralistic international community. In every period of history, even in the time of the strictest bipolarity during Cold War, there were individual players. China has always been a separate, how should I say, player, not one being subjected to the bipolarity. And there was a non-aligned movement which brought together a number of smaller states. So I believe that some sort of pluralistic society will emerge. Not the same as it existed during Cold War. It will be different, surely. But it won't be unipolar, it won't be bipolar, it won't be tripolar. It starts with the three major powers, but how it will evolve and what kind of plurality will come as a result remains to be seen.
Mr. Türk, what a pleasure always talking to you at critical times.
Thank you for having me, and I wish you many good conversations in the future, because I'm sure that the situation will remain volatile. And media have a very important role in this sort of situation. Bring many interlocutors.
I'm sure that is our responsibility. Thank you so much.